Hi, welcome to class number 8. This is nuk234, Immersive VR Compositing in Nuke, and I am your professor, Daniel Smith, and welcome to class number 8. This is a very exciting class because we've been working so hard on the whole concept of VDI, or view-dependent imagery, for our theme park ride. And our immersive entertainment venue is this troll screen that we've been working so hard on, but it's going to be integrated into this environment. And you can see the ride track along the ground here that we designed out. And this is what we're going to be doing today. This is the end result of today's class. And I'm just going to scrub through this real quick, and you can kind of see how we move through the environment, through the practical 3D elements, and there's our troll on screen, and it integrates into our environment. And what's really important is how you can see that it looks like an extension of the environment. So real grass, well, not real, but CG grass and rocks that are being generated from 3D with a flat polygonal screen, which is got the result of the comp that we produced last week. So you can see how it continues from real to virtual in the screen. And we're building this in Nuke, and this actually is straight out of Nuke's 3D render. And that's the key here, is I initially put it together in Maya, but then we need to put it together inside of Nuke. So that way we can use Nuke as our render engine to generate the VR, which will happen next week. Let's jump in and get the ride-based motion platform animation all worked out. All right, so we're jumping back into an earlier version of Maya where we had our motion worked out with the motion base. And you can see it's guided along this track. And this is the view that we generated all the imagery for our screen. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go and replace the screen with our composite. So I'm going to change out the texture map to class 8 comp. And you're going to see in this week's downloads, there is the VDI final comp from class 7. A PNG sequence. So open that up, and we're going to have to make sure that it's set to use image sequence. There we go. So that way, as we can scrub through here, we can see that our image sequence is now back on the screen. And whereas previous weeks we had this whole environment worked out back here, now it's just a two-dimensional image. And in a real production, what would happen is this would be a rear projection screen with two projectors back here projecting a stereoscopic image onto this rear projection surface. And the reason we would choose rear projection is because if we would put the projector back here in this kiosk and project this way, the image is going so far down that we do run the risk of projecting it across the heads of the passengers. And if we put anything in the foreground that is in front of the screen to help blend the screen, it could cast shadows onto the screen surface, and we don't want that. So rear projection is the best solution for something like this. So based on that, what we want to do is, actually I want to bring in some trees. So I'm going to import my trees here. And these trees are critical for the design and layout of the ride, because these boxes that I initially put in the previs were to represent that we were going to put stuff over here. So let's select those. Let's just get rid of those and hide them. And these trees are now in their proper place for the visualization that I need. Now, I only brought those in for now because it's important because they're used as framing devices. So I'm going to look through my shot cam, and we're going to see how this tree is purposely placed in front of the screen to help mask the edge of the screen, and we wipe underneath it. Now, the field of view that we currently have is from our old camera setup, and it's not really how we're going to see things. So I'm going to go and select our camera, and we're going to change it back to a normal camera. So our focal length is 24, but we had our overscan in here set to post scale of 1.9. So we're going to put that back to 1, so it's truly acting like a 24 millimeter camera. And we can kind of see what our field of view is going to look like a little bit better. Much better. Now, this is also going to give us a better idea of how to work with our devices. So I'm going to split up my view here. And we're going to have this view, and we're going to have the shot cam view. And that way we can have both of these up. And let's see, smooth shade. Use all lights and hardware texture. There we go. Okay, so this way we can see and control our animation, as well as see the results of our animation and have the graph editor down below. So I'm going to grab this controller right here, and you can see that we can move and sway and heave the motion base. And that's part of the idea. Is I don't want to take it too far. The rig will break visually, but it doesn't break physically. But I do want to kind of go within the limits of the rig. So if it can only go that high. So one thing I was thinking about was having the ride vehicle, as it approaches this tree branch, to suddenly have to duck under it. So we're going to add a little bit of a keyframe right about there. And let's hit S and set key. And then as it goes underneath it, we'll back it down and maybe rotate it, set key, and come back in, and we'll bounce up a little bit, move itself forward. All right. So that way now we see that as we're cruising along, it's vroom, like that. And then we're going to rotate and lean down and investigate. We're going to kind of see, oh yeah, well, we've got this little troll guy here, and we're going to just kind of see what he's doing. And right now, we're not sure what he's up to, so we're just kind of following along, rocking back and forth, and then he suddenly gets up. So it's like, oh crap. So right about here, I want to set a key. He jumps up, and thus we're going to explode upward and move backward and rotate a little bit. So it really kind of has a reaction to that, like, whoa. All right. Let's a little bit further up. Set key. So that way it springs up and reacts. So we can go through here and do a lot of fancy little movements and gyrations and stuff like that just by keyframing this main controller right here. Oh, undo. All right. And there's another control down at the bottom, which this is for the base. Now, most of the time you do not want to keyframe that because it is keyed to see the main picture here. But at the very front, I want to keyframe it away and at the back. So I'm going to probably move right about here. I'm going to set a key and go back, and we're just going to turn it just slightly, just so at the beginning of our little move, let's get that other control. There we go. So at the beginning of our move, that way we don't quite see the screen. I don't want to see that screen. And then at the very end here, as we are moving away from the monster, trying to get away, right about here, I want to start spinning the opposite direction so we can see the tunnel and we can move on with our ride. So I'm going to set a key there. And right about here, we're going to do a 360 and rotate. We're going to do about a 360 here to face the tunnel and set a key there. And there we go. And you see that nice little spin into the tunnel. And it looks something like this. So it's like, whoa, and we're into the tunnel. All right, so I'm going to load up the final animation and we're going to check it out. All right, so here is the final animation file that I included with today's downloads, and this also has the entire set all dressed up. So I just wanted to, I'll give you a little tour in a second, but here is the, if you go into the downloads and check in the movies folder, I made 3 play blasts of this. So let's open this up and you can see, here comes the ride vehicle. It surges up towards that and drops down underneath. And then we see, oh no, there's the troll. It backs away from the swing. It's panicking. We're coming back and we flip around and we're through the tunnel. So 400 frames. But you can see also how the image on the screen is distorting and stretching based upon where the ride vehicle is. Now I have 2 different movies right here. One is a 50 millimeter lens and a 92 millimeter lens. Now the 50 millimeter lens is the approximate field of view of the average person, which is about 50. That's why we use a 50 for a portrait lens. So this was trying to get a sense of what it would look like from the ride vehicle seeing the bar in front of you. And it looks pretty decent. And then the 92 millimeter is a version that's zoomed in a little bit more, trying to get a point of view of a person that is kind of like leaning forward in the seat and also simulating a little bit more of what the field of view is going to look like in our VR glasses. So you can kind of see how this is going to work out. All right, so back here in Maya, we have our entire environment. And you can see that we have a new tunnel structure that looks a little bit more like our troll. And I eliminated the initial tunnel because we're just coming through. And we've got some fallen trees, logs, some grass, some boulders, but also we've got girders and concrete walls of a ride. Now, typically it's going to be a little bit darker. You probably wouldn't see that, or we might paint them black, all those sorts of good things. But it was really easy to flesh this out inside of Maya, a little more interactivity. And then it's all about exporting. Now, Nuke has a limitation of being able to only put like a texture on an object. So you can't do face assignments with texturing inside of Nuke and things like that. So I had to export out each individual object, even to individual different clumps of grass and their associated textures. So things like the ground over here are broken up into 3 chunks of polygons, plus the polygon in the middle, and basically select each object, export selection as a OBJ, nuke assets, and we exported all the OBJs out. And you'll find those in your Class 8 nuke assets folder. And each texture is also then exported out. So we have a whole folder of OBJs all the way down through here. All right. Now, we also need to re-export our motion base. So select the motion base and go to Alembic Cache and export selection to Alembic. So make sure you export this out, and I will be putting that also into the folder with all the nuke assets as well. But the key here is to rebuild this inside of Nuke. Now, yes, we could download some plugins and do like 360-degree render cams out of Maya, but I want to do it in Nuke and show you guys how powerful Nuke 3D environment and being able to create 360 camera equatorial panoramic VR cameras is inside of Nuke. So that's the goal here, even though Maya has a much better shading system, but you know, Nuke now has V-Ray for Nuke, and you can do a lot in Nuke that you couldn't do before. So let's jump over into Nuke. All right, so we have a bright, shiny default Nuke, and let's go and set up our project settings. So we are dealing with 400 frames, and we're going to make our default resolution Ultra 4K. That way we can always, we can change this later, but I'm just going to keep that as the default. And this will eventually be stereo, so let's set up views for stereo and use colors in UI. So that way everything is set to go. And let's save this comp, and we're going to call this our work in progress comp. There we go. And now the first thing to do is really, we need our camera. So I'm going to load in a geometry read geo. We're going to read in our Alembic file. So right there, motionbase.abc, open, create all in one, and just give it a few moments. It takes usually about 10-15 seconds for it to read the data and bring in all the different cameras. Perfect. So we're going to keep this camera, and we're going to get rid of, we don't need the axis, we need the motion base. That's our actual geometry. In fact, let's find where it is, put the headlight on, and let's see which camera is which, because one of these is the center cam, left cam, right cam. Okay, so that's the center cam. We can actually get rid of that one, and we'll call this our shot cam, which is the center cam. And then we have our stereo left and our stereo right. Okay, awesome. So now that we have our stereo left and our stereo right cam, we need to create a join view and join those two together. So that way they act as one stereo camera. And then we're also going to bind this together with a scene. We're going to be a lot of scene nodes, and put that together like that. And we also want to bring in our screen, of course. So let's create another regeo, and we're going to load in our geometry for our screen. So let's find that. There it is, screen object. Open. And let's put that into our scene as well. So let's take a look through one of our cameras and see if we can see our screen. Yep, there it is. Okay. So with our screen, we need to have a texture. Our texture is going to be the render. So let's do a read, and let's read in the comp from last week. And we can see right there. Let's replace the L with a % lowercase v. There we go. So now we have a stereoscopic pair, and we just put that right on the image. Right there. Turn the headlamp off, and we should see we have our screen just right. Okay, perfect. And I'm going to also include the shot cam in there, because that way we can look from either the center cam, left, or right. All right. Awesome. So now what we need to do is we need to create a kind of like a gizmo on our stereo cams, and uncheck read from file so it doesn't continuously read from that Alembic file, because that's not going to change. Stereo right, stereo left. Let's switch to projection. And this is because I want to be able to adjust the window scale. The window scale, when we play with this, we can get our sizes just a little bit larger to simulate some different fields of view from the camera. And you see how we have the bar of the ride vehicle right there. I like to see where that is going to cut off things for the visualization. So by scaling our window up a little, we're still got our same cameras, but it gives us a slightly different field of view. So what we could do is we could manually type this every time, or we could create a expression to link all of these to one master control. So what I'm going to do is on the shot cam, we're going to go into create a user knob, so manage user knobs, and we're going to pick the control for window scale. So let's find that. Let's find projection, window scale. There we go. So here now we have a window scale control. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this to control or reference the other ones. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to say edit and window scale control. And let's copy that. Select done. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the other cameras, the stereo left and stereo right, add expression. So we're going to change that. But you see it says error. Nothing is named Windows Scale Control. That's because we need to name the node that it comes from. So it's called shot cam dot and scale control. Let's make sure that's okay. And then we'll do the same thing here, because it all has to be the same anyways. So shot cam. Capitalization is important. There we go. So I'm going to go into edit expression, and I'm just going to copy this whole thing, so it'll be a lot easier to do these guys down here. It's a real simple expression. It's not too complex. But What's going to happen though is now I can open this up and I can change this to 1, and you can see it's gone 1, 1, 1 all the way down and 1 there. And we could even go so far as to, if this is always equal 1, 1, 1, 2, we could also add the expression right here and put in shot cam wind scale control .u. There we go. Okay. So now it should be really easy because I just have to go 2, and it goes 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Perfect. Okay. So now the cameras are all set up. And now I need to start bringing some objects in. So let's bring in our Regio. And we're gonna assemble our room. So 1, copy, paste, paste. Okay. So the room that this is in a couple different pieces. So let's grab the walls. The walls are called room OBJ, and floor, and our ceiling. Where is our ceiling? Our roof. That's it. Now you may be wondering why I had to have 3 different objects for this. And again, it's part of the limitations of Nuke shading right now, that we can't have multiple textures on different objects and stuff like that. So in order for me to get a different texture on the floor, I'm going to be using different objects. So let's read in the textures for this. So let's go to textures. And what we've got here is we've got our wall concrete, and we've got our regular concrete, which is this black stuff. So let's start with the black stuff on the floor. Close this all out, and we're going to put that on the floor. Let's turn off the grid, and you can kind of see how that's working out. Now, it's really meant to be tiled, so what I would do here in this case is tile this up a little bit. So I'm going to take the concrete and I'm going to reformat it, because right now it's 1024 by 1024 into a 2K square. Now, I want you to understand why we're doing this. And so I'm going to reformat this into 2K. Now, the reason why we reformat it into 2K is because of the way the tile node works. Tile is simply going to tile the texture that already exists within the limits of the image resolution. So by up-resing it, now if I do a 2 by 2, each one of these tiles is the same resolution as the original 1024 by 1024, because it's still a 2K texture. But I'm going to go 3 by 3, and let's see how that is applied to the floor. There we go. So that's pretty cool. And now we'll put this together with the concrete. So let's put a scene together and put these objects all together in the same scene, essentially. So I'm going to take this and let's connect that over there. And this way we can look through our shot cam and we can see what the scene is going to look like right here. All right. And let's put this on the walls. Now the walls have the same issue. So we're going to reformat that into a 2K square. But this texture is not square. It's 500 by 300. So I'm going to set this to distort so it fills that frame. And then we're going to use a tile, and we're probably going to tile this a greater amount. So I'm going to go with, well, let's take a look at the scene. 8 rows and 15 columns. And that gives us a nice little walled out texture right there. And we're going to put the same thing up on the roof as we have on the floor. And I'm just going to go ahead and put all of these things together into one scene. And I'm going to walk you through it. But it's basically the same process over and over and over of applying these textures, getting them to tile just right. And then it's about lighting, because there are no lights in here. So let's go look at the final comp. All right. In Nuke, and we've got all the objects from Maya brought over, and we've got our base textures on it. But you can see it looks pretty horrific because there's no lighting. And that's one of the things with Nuke, is that we can pop out here and we can take a look. Let's unlock our camera. There we go. And we can look around and we can see that we have all our stuff. We've got our tunnel. We've got our very, very flat screen. We've got all our geometry, just like we had in Maya. But we don't have any lighting. And that's one of the troubles here with Nuke, is that when we bring in the lighting, even if I just put a lamp on, you can see that there's some surfaces don't react quite right to the light, and some do. Some are okay, some aren't, and I've had a lot of trouble having some consistency with this. But if you just play with everything one thing at a time, you can get a pretty good result. And considering how we're basically making this as a previs of the environment with a high quality visual effect shot that is going on the screen, the environment can kind of look a little gamey, and that's okay. I'd like to get it better, and we're going to get it better, but for the purposes of this class, this is a visualization of what's going to be practically built in the real world, and not an actual final quality product. So we're going to take a look at our renders, but you can see with the headlamp on, not even our screen shows up. So this is the final comp, and I've disabled a bunch of nodes, but we're going to go through it item by item and show how and why I put certain things in certain places. Now, the first and most important thing is I replaced the texture of the screen with an emission node. The emission shader makes sure that the screen will be illuminated at all times. And let's switch this to 2D so we can see what the render looks like. See, without the emission shader on there, it's not going to work as well. Of course, now it works just fine. But let's enable our lighting. So if you look down at the bottom of my script here, and let's go to an earlier frame. This is the lighting, and the lighting is all turned off. I've got a couple of key lights, direct lights pointed in 3 different directions, which basically give a base amount of illumination to everything in here. And then there is a light. Let's back up a few frames here. There is a light inside this log right here that is meant to illuminate this edge so we can kind of see it there. There's a light inside the tunnel, which is going to brighten things up this way to illuminate the tunnel. And that's mainly for the end of the sequence, when we go in here, this light lights up the back of the tunnel and gives some nice illumination along this area. And then I have 3 spotlights that are shooting down light in key areas, lighting things up. And this is where we get our real problems illuminated. Notice how I have a spotlight that's illuminating this tree, this ground, but this ground is not responding the same way as this ground is. So as we go through the different sections, I'm just going to point out how some of these modifiers, these shaders are set up. So this emission shader right here, you can see without that, it's under like default illumination. But what this does is it keeps it exactly texture pixel for pixel the same no matter what the illumination is. And then I have a diffuse shader, and I've used this several times, set to 0. And that just basically, I've done some color correction to make it feel just about right. So there's that room. And then we've got the motion platform, and I just have a basic checkerboard on it. Next week we're going to texture that, because once you get 360, then we'll be able to see it. But for this week, I didn't bother because we don't really get to see it that much. So I also have a basic material shader on this track rail, and that was so it would catch some light and catch some specularity, just a little tiny bit here and there. And then if we go over here, this is the tunnel section. Now the tunnel is actually made out of many different pieces, but only really 2 pieces. There is a front end which has this ridge right here, and if I disable that, you'll be able to see where it covers to. It fills up right in there. And then there's the sections, which are all basically one section. So if I delete this, it all goes. But if we look at it in 3D, you can see that it's all basically the same piece. Each piece gets essentially instanced through a transform geo and spaced out 25 more units. So if I take this last unit and I set that out to 50 or see -200, there we go. You can now see the size of one tunnel unit. It goes from half an arch to this ribbing to the next half arch. So by spacing each one 25 more units down the length of the tunnel, it allows us to have instances of this geometry without duplicating it several times. And then we also have a craggy stone texture grade and applied to the pipes that are running down inside the tunnel right there. So that's what that section does there. Then we have our trees over here, and this particular tree, let's switch back to our 2D render, is, let's see, let's back it up a little bit more. This tree right here is using a Phong shader to use the bump map as a Phong. Since we can't do bumps with Nuke's default, I decided to use the bump maps as specular highlights in it to give it just a little bit more texture. And like, for example, this tree stump right here, this guy is coming in over here. Yeah, there's the tree stump. There's his spec and his color. And let's switch this to the Phong shader and enable that. So you can see that the Phong shader is given a little bit more depth and texture to that. And the same thing with some of these logs. Just connect that up to there. as the diffuse shader. There we go. So we've got our logs and stumps, we've got our trees, and this one, yep, see how that much better that one looks? Cool. And then here's our ground, and you can see the ground doesn't have the same illumination. So I have again a diffuse shader, but this time I've bumped it up to 3 and put it over to here, so it blends a little bit better and looks a lot better for that. And the same with these rocks over here. Let's just enable those. There we go. So the rocks are good and all that. And then we have our grass. And our grass is, again, just using that diffuse shader. And the main thing here was during the close-up areas, I wanted this grass to look like the grass that's in the movie. So there's the diffuse shader to keep it the right color and a slight color correct to adjust the color here so it would blend into the grass up there. And then we all go down here to our scanline render. And one more big thing here is at the very end, as we whip around and go into the tunnel, I felt like the tunnel was way too dark. I wanted it to go off into darkness, like you couldn't see what was happening. So the scanline render gives you for free a depth pass of all your geometry. So I have a shuffle node here that's shuffling the depth pass out to RGB and A, so that way it is displayed as grayscale. And we can see that depth is really, really good. Got all the detail in it. So we have a grade node here that reverses the depth and a color correct that's basically darkening everything down based on that depth. And I've keyframed the opacity of this over time, so that way when we are looking this direction, that it does not darken things down too severely. And that way, as we rotate and turn around, it then darkens down. And it looks much, much better that way. And we may use some more of these techniques next week to kind of like finesse the shot. But let's take a look at what the final render looks like. And there we go. So I'm going to make this nice and big, and we're going to play it. Awesome. So I kind of ran through that, but if you have any questions, ask on the forums. I'll be more than happy to help. I'm going to work and make this a little bit more cinematic in places. I want to put some more lights in here and try to darken down some of the edges. But right now I'm pretty happy with this, and it's working really well. Look how nicely the foreground grass, the foreground grass right here hides his hands. That's a big thing, because when he jumps up and slaps his hands down here, I mentioned this in a previous class, how, let's look up here, how he actually came out of the screen. And consequently, when we do our compositing, his hands, both right here, are being clipped off that screen. But when you look at this in stereo depth, both arms are out of the screen. What does that mean? Well, it means that when he's breaking that frame right there, that's usually a bad thing. But we put foreground plants and rocks directly in front of his hands, so that way in stereo, those are hidden. Those are hidden from view, and it looks like he came out of that screen, which is really, really cool. Now, there's an anaglyph node right here. You can hit the 1 key. If you have anaglyph glasses, you can view this, and you can see how the hands look like they're not cut off, that they're really, there's a continuity of depth from the practical to the visual screen, which is really compelling. So what we're going to be doing next week is we're going to address any issues that come up in this area here. I'm actually thinking about adding a bridge that we kind of go through this archway before we round the corner here. And we're going to be building 360-degree cameras and creating lat-long images here directly in Nuke to put out to our VR apparatus. So until next week, I will see you in the forums, and thank you so much.